Well, it's so good to have all of you with us today. My name is Chris, and we're in this series, Slaying Giants. Now, literally, we're in part 4. So if you're a guest with us today, maybe the first time taking a step in, I'm so glad you're with us. And I just want to encourage you, go to tcconline.tv, click on demand, and you can watch parts 1 through 3. I promise you won't be lost today, but I think you will be so encouraged, and so it will be so helpful if you watch the first 3 parts. You see, this entire series is focused on the giants that are, well, in all of our lives. In part 1, we focused in on the giant of comparison, and then part 2, we just only focused on spotting the giant of pride. Part 3, we looked at how to slay the giant of pride. And today, part 4, we're going to be, spotting and slaying the giant of criticism. Now, we live in a world, all of us do, that are just filled with opportunities to, review things, review businesses, restaurants. I mean, we can review anything and everything. And research tells us that 99% of all people actually read reviews, and 96% of all people actually look for negative reviews. Think about that. And so our world, whether it's Amazon or Walmart online or Google, we're always looking and reading and sometimes even giving reviews. I started looking through at some funny and some not so funny reviews, and I came across this one 5-star review. It's titled, It Works, and this is what the guy writes. He goes, "It's a filter for a vacuum cleaner. It works. It didn't cost much. It fits well." And then he goes on and goes, "Dear God, has my life come to this? I'm now leaving reviews on Amazon for wet, dry vac filters. I remember being young, having dreams, having hopes, and having desires for something better. Now, this is what I'm doing on Saturday morning." Well, then there's this 1-star review, and this 1-star review was for a drone. You know what a drone is. It's one of those helicopter-looking devices that can hover up in the air. It can take pictures. You can fly it around your yard or the ball field. A drone. But this is what the person wrote, giving a drone a 1-star review. "Doesn't slice deli meat. I try to use this as an automatic meat slicer. In my mind, these fast-spinning props would slice my turkey, my salami, my pepperoni, and most importantly, my ham. This product simply refuses to slice my deli meat," and then they end with "not impressed." Then there is this 1-star review for a butterfly farm. I didn't even know they had butterfly farms, but I guess there's butterfly farms, which would be awesome to see. But this is what this person gave the butterfly farm, a 1-star review, and wrote, "Awful place if you don't enjoy swarms of butterflies. Also, fruit on show is for butterflies only and not to be eaten." I guess if you don't like butterflies, you shouldn't go to a butterfly farm. Now, this person only gave a 1-star review and didn't write anything. Just gave a 1-star review and no comment, no explanation, just a 1-star review. So the small business owner decided to, reply to the 1-star review. And this is what the business owner replied with. "Hi, Phil. You are not one of our customers. Your wife is one of our competitors' close friends. Why review us 1 star when you have never been? And also, you passed away 2 years ago." Gives you some context to a 1-star review. And then this person, which I think this is the funniest review of them all, gave Walmart a 3-star review. Yep, a 3-star review. And this is what he wrote. "My dearest, if you're reading this, it means that I have died of dysentery and while waiting for an associate to open the glass cabinet which keeps me from the singular pack of undergarments that I wish to purchase. Gone are the days of free-range undies. Oh, how I long to see them roam free once more. Remember me fondly, your love, a man who just wanted underwear." You see, criticism is all around us. 99% of us read reviews, and 96% of us look for the negative reviews, the criticism. And so today we're going to be not only spotting the giant of criticism, we're going to learn how to slay him. But what we have to understand is the giant of criticism actually, well, the giant of criticism, it's twins. There's two of them. And we have to recognize that, well, the giant of criticism has twins. And so we have to understand there's a critic outside of us, right? The people around us who are critics dealing with the giant of criticism. And there's a giant inside of us, the critic inside of us. And we not only need to spot both of them, but we need to slay both of them. Now, in this series, we've been focusing in on specifically a guy named David. And when we first meet David, he's a shepherd working for his dad. And then last week, David gets, asked, commanded by King Saul to come be, his musician. And when he did that, he gave his best, and he got promoted by King Saul himself to be his trusted armor bearer. And all of this is happening as David knew himself that God had selected him to be the next king of Israel. That's where we left off in the story last week. And then all of a sudden the story takes an interesting turn. We're in the book of 1 Samuel, and 1 Samuel chapter 17 specifically, and this is where we're going to step back into the story. Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped in the valley of Elah and drew up their battle lines to meet the Philistines. Now, the Philistines were the arch nemesis to the Israelites. The Israelites had come into what God had called the promised land. They had shoved the Philistines out. Now the Philistines are back, and they want what they think is theirs. So the battle lines are drawn, Philistines on one side, the Israelites on the other side, and all of a sudden one day a champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. And the Bible goes on and gives us a very detailed description of this champion, this warrior, this fighter, Goliath from Gath. We're told that he was somewhere like 9 feet tall. Now, what's interesting is when you read in the Bible, it gives us this unit of measurement, a cubit. And there was a long cubit and a short cubit, but basically what a cubit was the distance between your elbow and your fingertip. And I know you're right with me. Well, it depends on, how long that is. Every person has a different length between their elbow and their fingertip. And so when you see 9 feet, this is like the best guess with the number of cubits, but we're just not really sure. It could have been a little shorter. But think about it. This is a massive guy. It's like Shaquille O'Neal, right? A massive human being. He's 9 feet tall. We're told that he had a bronze helmet on his head. And some scholars, what we know is Egypt actually had drawings of these Philistine warriors, and they didn't have bronze helmets. They actually had these feathered headdresses. And some scholars think that maybe Goliath actually had a bronze helmet with a feathered headdress on, which increased his height. Again, we don't know for sure, but it's an interesting perspective. So he has this bronze helmet on. Not only does he have bronze helmet, he has bronze armor weighing some 125 pounds. He had a bronze, what they called greaves, which were like a metal armor from the knees all the way down to his ankles. He had a javelin, this curved like sword, strapped onto his back, and then his spear. They used this description for the shaft of the spear. They called it, it was like a weaver's rod. And there's some mystery around exactly what that depicted, what that was trying to describe. But then they go on to say the tip of the spear weighed some 15 pounds. Think about this. This is a massive, intimidating, fierce warrior that fought countless people. And obviously he had won because he was still alive. And Goliath, the warrior from Gath, the Philistine fighter, comes out and he shouts, he goes, "Hey, why do you come? And why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not the Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul?" Now he's just coaxing them, he's just stirring the pot, but don't lose sight of that statement, servants of Saul. We'll come back. He goes on, he goes, "Choose a man and have them come down to me. You select anyone you want. 1v1. I will fight any soldier out of an entire Israelite army. I'll choose one. I'll fight that one. If he's able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us. Then the Philistine, Goliath, said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." So there's the rules. 1v1. Winner takes all. The one who lives, that army wins. The one who dies, that army loses. And how did Saul, the king, the leader of the Israelite army, and the other soldiers respond to Goliath, this giant? We're told that they were terrified and dismayed. Now, while all of this is going on, the story kind of shifts the spotlight back to, Jesse, Jesse being the father of David. And all of a sudden, we're led into kind of another kind of subplot storyline. Out of Jesse's 8 sons, his 3 oldest sons were actually on the front lines. They were fighting the war. They would have been 3 of the soldiers that were running away from Goliath, terrified and dismayed. They were on the front lines. Then we're told that David, the youngest, was going back and forth between Saul and being a shepherd. His dad, he was helping Saul as his armor bearer and his musician, but then he'd come back home and help his dad with the sheep, with the herds, right? He was going back and forth. What we're not really clear about is, the other brothers. Now, what we know in the book of Numbers, there's actually an age. It was age 20 that you were allowed to fight in the army. So maybe, we know David was younger than that, so he couldn't really fight in the army. And maybe the other brothers, maybe they were younger too. Maybe they weren't 20 or older to fight. Maybe because already 3 brothers were fighting on the front lines, maybe the other brothers got a pass. We're not really sure, but what we do know, 3 were on the front lines and David was going back and forth. And for 40 days, Goliath, the Philistine giant, came out, shouted in the morning, in the evening. Said, 1v1, you pick anyone. I'll fight anyone. Winner takes all. And one day, Jesse comes to David and it's like, hey, I want some news from the front line. Remember, Jesse's a dad. His 3 oldest sons were on the front lines. He goes, I want to hear what's going on. So he gives David some supplies. He gives some bread for the brothers. He gives some cheese for the commanders. He's like, hey, go take these supplies and bring me back news of my 3 oldest boys. So David does that. He heads to the war zone and he drops off the supplies and he goes out to find his brothers. Why? Because he wants to see his brothers, see how they're doing, and he needs to go back to tell his dad what is going on. And so we're told that David left the things, the cheese and the breads, the supplies, with the keeper of supplies, and David ran, right? Like he runs to the battle lines, which is an insight into David's character. And he asked his brothers how they were. As he was talking to them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from the lines and shouted his usual defiance, the same thing he had been saying for 40 days. But this time, David heard it with his own ears. I'm sure David had heard about Goliath. News about this Philistine warrior had spread throughout the land. But in this moment, he heard his voice. He heard his defiance of the armies of Israel. And David saw him with his own eyes. And whenever the Israelites saw the man, Goliath, they all fled from him in great fear. So David asked the men standing near him, what will be done for the man who kills a Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? It's a simple question. He goes, hey, what's the reward? Whoever kills Goliath, what does that person get? And the reward was a pretty amazing reward. They told him, like, hey, the reward is great wealth, a daughter from the king, one of the king's daughters, and oh, by the way, tax exempt. You never have to pay taxes again. I mean, what a reward. But for David, it wasn't about that. I think he was just trying to get that conversation going because David knew what he was going to do. And as David listened to the reward, he goes, who is this uncircumcised Philistine, this pagan warrior, that he should defy? And listen to what David says. Defy the armies of the living God. Now remember, we looked at this in the storyline when King Saul defeated the Amalekites. What did Saul do? He built a monument to honor himself. When Goliath walked out to shout at the Israelites, to throw down the gauntlet, to draw the battle line, to say, hey, 1v1, what did he call? He used the phrase, hey, servants of Saul, slaves of Saul, armies of Saul. But David paints a vastly different picture because David has a vastly different perspective than King Saul and Goliath. He goes, hey, you should defy the armies of the living God. And when Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger. Can you spot the giant? It's pride. It's pride. Now, I think about this moment. Eliab was the first one that got paraded in front of Samuel, God's prophet. Eliab was the first one where God's like, nope, not him. I don't look at outward appearance. I look at the heart, and it's not them. And then Eliab had to stand there as brother after brother after brother got paraded in front of Samuel, and God said, nope, not that one. Nope, not that one. And then the runt of the family, the youngest of the family, David comes up, and God goes, that one. And I think Eliab had never slayed the giant of pride within him, and it had been burning and burning and burning within him. And in this moment, that anger just overtook him as he heard his brother's voice. And Eliab looks at David and says, why have you come down here? You see, he's a critic of his motives. He goes, and with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? He criticizes his value, his worth. But he goes on, he's not done. He goes, I know how conceited you are, right? He criticizes his heart. He questions his heart. And then he literally says, and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle. And yet again, he criticizes his motives. And David turns and faces him. He goes, what have I done to you? Can't I even just speak? He then turned away to someone else, brought up the same matter, and the men answered him as before. You see the giant of criticism, right? They're twins. There's two of them. The critic outside of us and the critic inside of us. And so I just want to take a moment just to share some very practical ways on how we can slay both of these giants. Again, the giant outside of us and the giant within us. The critic outside of us and the critic inside of us. So let's focus on the first one, the critic outside of us. How do we slay that giant? How do we handle criticism? I mean, it's these questions. How do you process negative feedback or negative criticism? Or how do you lead through negative feedback or negative criticism? And this is what I do. And maybe I hope this is helpful because here's the thing. Yeah, I lead within the church and I've done this for many, many, many years. But some of the loudest critics, and I'm not saying this should be, but it is. Some of the loudest critics are Christians who haven't slayed the giant of pride within them. And I know that's a weighty statement, but I just want you to know, I get this, and this is how I've tried to, not perfectly. I don't get this all right all the time. I'm just telling you, this is how I've tried to, slay the giant of the critic outside. The first thing I would encourage you to do, and this is what I do, you got to face your critics. You got to face them. It takes incredible courage to face. I mean, I think about that moment where David turns, he faces his brother. Like he just faces him. Then he turns away, but he faces his brother. It's like, I can't even speak, right? He turns and faces, he looks him in the eyes. And my encouragement for you is to face your critics. Again, it's going to take incredible courage. You're not going to want to. You're not going to want to be around. You're not wanting to see them. You don't want to hear them. Right? You got to face your critics. And here's the thing with facing critics. The closer the critic, the closer that relationship, the greater the giant, the bigger the giant, the more powerful the giant. And that's what's hard, especially, I think about David with his oldest brother, a brother that he looked up to, a brother that he learned so much from, a brother that he wanted to model and follow. And then all of a sudden now, his brother is attacking him. You see, we got to face and we got to recognize that the closer that relationship is, the greater the giant, which means it's going to take a lot of courage. But you got to face it, because if you try to ignore the giant, well, they're all so intrusive. They're going to set up shop and they're going to stay in your life. They just don't go away. You got to slay them. So face it. Second step, I think, is the most important. You got to feel it. Got to feel it. I tell myself, and I've coached this in so many people, give yourself 24 hours. When the giant criticism attacks you, when that comment comes at you, when that text message, when that email, when that social media post, when that comment, when the giant comes at you, give yourself 24 hours and feel all of that real, raw emotion. We know it's there. But as you feel it, this is what I want you to do. There's going to be some righteous anger that you should hold on to. But no, right in the midst of that righteous anger, pride is wreaking havoc within you. And you know it's there. And you're going to have a conversation and all the things you want to reply to, and you want to text them, and you want to post, and you want to call and let that person have it, and you're going to tell everyone what that person, all of that within us, that pride that's just desiring to seek and destroy. I'm just going to tell you, when you lean into all of that feelings, slay the giant right then. Call it out within you. Again, hold on. There's going to be some righteous anger, some godly anger, right? That you've been unjustly hurt, right? So you don't let go of that. But you need to separate out and just say, you know what? I better slay this giant now, because if you don't slay it now, it's going to be so much more difficult to slay in the days and weeks to come. So give yourself 24 hours. And then in the 24 hours, whatever you do, don't reply. Don't text that person back. Don't post on Google or Amazon or whatever site you're on. Don't write that post and put it on social media. Don't for 24 hours. Because here's the thing. As you focus on slaying the giant of pride, the raw emotions will start to subside. We know that's true. That's why the 24-hour rule is just invaluable. 99.9% of the time I have lived by this, and it has saved so many relationships. It's helped protect the church as a whole, because God has entrusted leadership into my hands. It's protected the church. It's protected relationships. It's saved relationships. It's helped close the gap. It's helped me focus on me to keep pride out of making a mess, because pride makes a mess. That's why we got to face it, and we got to feel it. We got to slay that giant. Then we got to frame the criticism. And that's why you got to face it. And that's why you got to slay the giant of pride, so you can actually gain perspective around it. And there's two significant aspects when I say frame the criticism. One is you gotta mine for insight. There's a nugget in that criticism. Right? I'm not saying their motives in the criticism was pure, right? It's not. They're there to attack you, to break you down, to put you on public display, right? But there might be an insight in there that you should learn from, that you should hold on to. And when I say mine, it might take some effort for you to try to actually see what that nugget of truth, that nugget of gold, that insight that's going to help you be better, lead better. Got a mind for it. Don't waste it. And at the same time, you got to just dismiss the attack. Because criticism is all about attacking the person. That's really what it's about. I mean, that's what Eliab did to David. He just attacked his character, his motives. He devalued him. He attacked his heart. Right? It was just him. And you got to dismiss that. If you don't dismiss that, I'm going to tell you, then pride is going to creep back in, and you're not going to mind from the inside, and I'll tell you, it's all going to repeat again. At some point, pride's just going to win. And we can't let pride win. We got to slay it. And then the fourth thing that I'd encourage you to do, and this might take you off guard a little bit, you got to fight. But this is what I mean by fight. I don't mean fight with the person. That's being the critic. Fight for them. Fight for them. Fight for the relationship. Again, the closer the critic, the greater the giant. Fight for the relationship. We use the phrase close a gap. Now, you can't make the person close a gap, and this is what's hard. A lot of people, because of pride, they don't want to close the gap, and you can't make someone. Here's the thing that I've stopped doing. I've stopped trying to make people close the gap. I can't do that. But whenever someone wants to, I will be the first one to jump into that conversation because I want to fight for the relationship. You see, one of the things I recognize, and I hope you recognize this, that hurting people hurt people. They just do. And healthy people help people. And when we can become experts at slaying the giant of pride within us, it helps us be healthier so that we can actually help other people to fight for people, not with people. We got to start doing more fighting for people. That's why a phone call, a conversation, a coffee, a dinner, sitting around a table together can do such an amazing job to bring people together, to reframe criticism, to help heal what's been broken. But we got to do that. We got to do that. Now, it leads us to the critic inside of us. That's inside all of us. And there's two questions I'm just going to pose. And I would just encourage you to ask yourself these questions. Question number one is this. Are you attacking the person or the problem? If you're attacking the person, like Eliab did with David, you're just being a critic. Just being a critic. But if you're attacking the problem, now you're coming beside the person saying, hey, there's the thing here. And I just want to come beside you and walk with you, and let's figure it out together. Right? That's the difference between a critic and a coach. And they're vastly different approaches. I would just encourage you, before you send that text, before you send that email, before you post that review, are you attacking the person? Are you trying to figure out how to make that problem, right? Heal that problem, to fix that problem? Which one is it? Second question I would just encourage you to ask yourself is this. Do your words build up or tear down? It's a simple question we've asked our girls for years and years and years. Are your words building people up, or are they tearing them down? It's a really easy litmus test. I'm telling you, if your words are tearing down the person, you're being a critic, and that giant is wreaking havoc not only within you, but now that giant is wreaking havoc in that person's life. Or your words building people up. You're attacking the problem, not the person. 6-7 years ago, When me and my family moved to Pennsylvania, I was just trying to figure out the town. I was trying to figure out where to eat, where to go. I've always loved local places, nothing against chain restaurants and stores, but I always like to find the local businesses. And so I was trying to figure that out, and I had used Google Maps many times before. And so I started using Google Maps, and as I was using Google Maps to find different towns and different small businesses and different restaurants and all this, I started reading the reviews. Why? Because 99% of all people read reviews. And 96% of us, right, we look for negative reviews, and there's a lot of negativity out there. And what I discovered is there's so many negative reviews for small businesses. And these are real people that have poured themselves into their store, their restaurant, their business. And so one day I just decided to start leaving Google reviews. But I had one simple pursuit: only leave a 5-star review. If I couldn't mine for something positive in that experience, I just wouldn't leave it at all. But what's interesting is over the last 6-7 years, I've almost always been able to find the positive in maybe a not so positive experience. But what I wanted to do is just breathe life into every restaurant, every store, every business that I would go into and leave that 5-star review. And being a Google local guy, there's 10 levels. And so I started to level up. The more reviews, the more photos, the more questions, I would get more points. I went from level 1 to level 2, level 3, and I started making my way. You get nothing for doing that. But what was cool in this journey is also my family on vacations. And as we traveled around, I would be taking pictures of their meal or the store. And they at first it got really annoying, and they realized I was going to continue to do it. So then they started to join me, and they would travel, and they would send me pictures. It became this family experience. Well, this last September, I was within just a few points of hitting level 9. Again, there's 10 levels. Hitting level 9. And so I waited to come home. I was traveling. I waited to come home, and we all stood around the counter because they had been part of this journey with me for 6-7 years. And I had one last review to push me over to level 9. And this is actually the screenshot. And together I hit post and got 133 points and got a congrats. You're now a level 9 local guide. And we all celebrated and cheered and high-fived and laughed how ridiculous it was. You see, it's not about being level 9. I mean, there's been some 50 million people that have left a Google review. 50 million, that's a massive number. And guess what? There's only 3,585 level 9 local guides. For me to get to level 9, I left 602 5-star reviews, where I mined for the good, where I praised an employee, a store owner, a product, a meal, the environment, and just poured encouragement out. Not because I would ever get anything. As of right now, out of those 602 reviews, they've received 81 million views. See, I share all of this with you for this one reason. Let's slay this giant of being a critic. As Christ followers, we should be breathing joy and hope into everyone. Let's leverage our words to build up and not tear down. Let's stop attacking people and coming beside people. And let's attack problems all day long, yes, but that's together. But let's stop being critics. Let's slay the giant within us. And when the giant outside of us is coming at us, guess what? We have an opportunity to walk with that person. And together, maybe we could help slay the giant outside of us. Let's speak life into people. Let's build people up. Let's encourage. And together, we can have a whole lot less critics as we breathe life into every single person. Let's pray. Lord, I just pray that we'll focus on slaying the critic within us. And when the critic outside of us attacks us, Lord, we have such an amazing opportunity not to allow pride within us to attack that person across from us. Lord, may we handle it with grace and mercy and love. Come beside people, close the gap. Give us the strength, give us the courage. In your name I pray. Amen.